We did 3 sets in one day, and man, you're going to be blown away with how very different each of these sets look, and a ton of tips around false color and how we're taking that next level, not to mention a ton of new software advancements that we've made. We can't wait to show you all of this on today's episode. We just did 3 different sets, and in one day, we got these all set up. And you guys, I talked before about Nobe Omniscope, but I am like, now it's already like indispensable tool. And so one of the things that's kind of a change that I made from the last debrief that I wanted to share with everybody is I realized we were talking about like, man, we really need like a Mac Studio, and we need to throw a DeckLink card into it so we can get like multiple inputs. And then I realized, wait a minute, I could just route a multi-view over to it. And so by routing multi-view, I can kind of put as many shots as I want inside that multi-view and then have the scopes for that. So that was super effective. And then I ended up routing, we weren't using all of our cameras, so I routed that into our Ultimatte, not to do any keying out of it, but just to make it like a quick toggle that I could do. So it worked out really good. Let me show you what this kind of final multi-view looked like. So in the corner, I've got the scopes of the false color, of the 4 shot or 3 shots. Just one of them's duplicated. And then I've got our actual 3 shots. So first of all, this set felt awesome. I mean, didn't you guys really like this set?
Yeah, it looked real good.
Yeah.
I found myself believing that they were actually on the set.
That's the way we like to do it. And go ahead and make this false color larger though, just for a second, so we can kind of get into this. So here's the deal. Here's something that I'm like, oh my gosh, how I've been eyeballing this until now, which is hilarious now that I think about it. So one of the things that I've realized is like, man, I've got to really, especially as we're thinking through our different shots, I've got to really think through exposures. And so like this light that you see here, I'm trying to keep that relatively the same brightness as it is in this shot. And so now with the Ultimatte, I have the ability to control black and white levels. And so I was able to go in here and look at each of these shots and go like, okay, I've got this yellow again, which is like a bright white, but I've also got these right back here, right? And so each of those, I need to expose them very similarly. And this is just a still that I took, but believe me when I say I tuned this in a little more to get all of those hot spots to be exactly the same exposure. So kind of they're hitting kind of right in this area here. Sorry, let me clear that out to make that a little more obvious. Wow, I'm really good at drawing. So right here is kind of where I'm hitting, right? And so I don't really want to have the red. That's fully blown out. I mean, there could be reasons why I would want to do that, but by default, each of these actually had a little red in them because they're bright lights. And so they kind of had these little red dots inside them right here. And this had like a little red in here and in here and here as well. And so I just made a decision. This is a artistic decision, but I made a decision to kind of get all of those just slightly underexposed. We had the dynamic range to allow me to do that. And so go ahead and go back to that multi-view that has this in the corner, and then you can see the actual shots. What I loved about this is it let me get some very rich, deep shadows, and so that's something you don't typically see when you start looking at a lot of keyed footage, especially like on this shadow side of her face, on this shadow kind of coming through here and down in here. But then not only that, I was able to match the shadow level of him and the background, right? So you can see up here in this little quadrant, making that purple is maybe too hard to see, but you can see like that shadow of his and that shadow of the background, this exposure in this background area and right here is the same. And so by doing that, the key, a key to keying is a lot of key, is to make sure you're matching those black levels and those white levels. And so for me, this felt really nice. The only critique I have to this set, and then I'd love to hear everyone else's opinion, is we kind of see, hold on, let me do a different color. We kind of see in this background of the wide shot, we see just a little bit of a light back here in this corner. But outside of that, we don't really see any of what her side shot is. I mean, I guess you see this plant and you see the planty here in the window, but I do think this background, it just feels a little different. It feels pretty different than this background over here. So that's the only critique I have. And that's just the nature of this shape of this plate that we did. But overall, I think this quickly became one of my favorite sets. I loved the way it looked. What did you guys think about
One thing I'll say is
Yeah.
you and I briefly discussed the lights that are directly behind her, and you were talking about adjusting those levels. You and I did briefly discuss like maybe in the future when we're editing the plate, maybe we can pull that into Nobe Omniscope and then mask those lights individually and turn those and bring those levels down. That way we didn't affect the entire shot if you wanted to do something different.
Right.
So that was another option, another way we could have used Nobe Omniscope that we discussed. I just wanted to talk about that because I do think that could be, if it's like, the last thing that we can do if we're adjusting something to adjust those lights or something like that, and it's destroying the rest of the shot because
Right.
we're doing the entire image. It would be nice to be able to go in, mask those individual little locations, and then turn those down too.
Totally
So that's
agree.
another option.
Another thing that was happening in this set is the floor was shining. And so how did we get the floor to be shiny? I think we got some B-roll that we can kind of show. Here's Tyler laying on the ground. What you doing over there, Tyler?
Well, so we have this sheet of vinyl that's 54 inches wide, and it's pretty thick. It's 24 gauge, I think. And so it lays flat on the floor, pretty flat. And so we can lay that on the green screen floor, and it'll make the floor look glossy and reflective, the way floors in polished concrete. This place had polished concrete floors. And so when we didn't have that on there, the chairs did look like they were floating. They weren't in contact with the floor because your mind says, oh, there should be a reflection there.
Hmm.
And it wasn't there. When we first put it down, it looked to us like it was too shiny. And we thought, well, maybe we won't use it. But Andre was like, no, we need to have it. And he was right, of course. But it was making a weird reflection right underneath the chair where you could see the bottom of the chair and the back leg. It looked bizarre having it showing that much reflection. So what I did is climbed under there and cut out that little section underneath the chair.
So funny.
And then behind the little table in the middle. So technically there should be a reflection there, but we didn't really need it. And I think it really sells it having it just because you're not even seeing their feet, but just seeing the chair itself reflecting.
Yeah.
I'm pointing at the monitor over here on a floor. It makes it where your mind goes, oh yeah, of course those chairs are sitting on that floor.
Well, something I think that's interesting about this is kind of like when you look at it from the front, it looks perfectly normal. And then when you look at it from the back, you're like, what's happening there? So, like, it totally proves how, like, this angle, you're like, that looks weird. This angle, you literally, you don't even notice because the whole reflection of the chair is in there.
Yeah. I think the magic on this one was we all felt, whenever Andre, you were kind of in a meeting, but you were looking at the screen while we were out there messing around with it. We all felt like it was way too reflective. And if you go back and you find our debrief where we did the story summit, we use the same piece of, or maybe this is a new piece of vinyl, but we use
thickness and everything.
Yeah, a cut from the same roll of vinyl. And our guests then were standing directly on what was a very reflective marble floor. So it didn't need anything. It worked perfectly.
Yeah.
This time, we almost felt like I wanted to take it outside and like scuff it up on the concrete and take a little bit of that reflection off. So what Tyler did was by cutting out all of those awkward points, we found that perfect level of reflection because there was a point where it was too reflective because the cement floor was reflecting, but it wasn't like a mirror. But so finding that perfect level of reflection, I thought we did a really good job. Tyler, by you cutting that out and taking that really weird feeling, like it almost felt like the leg was just sticking down into the ground.
Ice or something.
Yeah, so finding that perfect level of reflection is what.
Well, and then there was also the edge of the vinyl on the backside. You could see a line where the edge of the vinyl, it was kind of specular. Yep. It didn't blend in. So cutting that out eliminated that edge. What we really want to have, they actually make 72-inch widths, but man, I would love to have like a 10-foot width that we could just put on the whole floor and would just have the
Yeah,
same
we
thickness
kept
of
talking about
thing.
those of you who are editors. We kept talking about how nice it would be to be able to feather in real life.
Yeah.
And there will be a callback to that exact thing Tyler was talking about, where those lines are here in a minute when we talk about another set. So
Yeah, so I thanks for crawling around and thanks for letting me push, because like it would have worked without it. I don't know if we have an easy way, Morgan, while I'm talking, to just bring up just a full size still of that wide shot, but it would have been fine without it. Like, we would have been fine. In fact, we ended up kind of reframing it a little where you don't see as much of the floor, but there you can see it.
It's a funny
That's
freeze
kind of
frame.
end result, just a little still from it. But you can see it just adds just a little. It's a little nuance. And when they kind of lift their foot up a little bit and tap it, you can see underneath the foot, and all these little subtle details add up to take us outside of the uncanny valley. And so I really felt like this was really pretty. We always are struggling with our wide shots to just like, how do we make this feel pretty?
Yeah.
And I think part of why this one felt pretty to us, or at least to me, is we have a clear key light that's kind of spilling across. And that's a more aggressive way to light a wide shot, because as the person that's closest to the key light, right, they're going to get a lot of light on their face. And as that continues to go, you can see over here, I mean, these shadows over here in this area start getting pretty dark, but I think what that ended up doing is something that's kind of interesting. So we're always trying to say, we're trying to shoot the shot so that we're shooting shadow side. And what's interesting is this is not shadow side for his face, but there is a shadow side of the wide, right? So all of this over here is in shadow. So I think this is kind of an interesting technique for us to explore more on some of these other shots, where when we do have this clear, motivated light, right, that's coming in through the window, we've got that. It still is giving us this shadow side that I think is really pretty. And I think this is an interesting way for us to consider lighting some of our wide shots. I will say just a last technical note on this. On the Ultimatte with the shiny floor, it can create some interesting challenges. So just know, like, it's not as simple as just putting something shiny down and then it's like it's fixed. Especially a note, just this is like super nerdy, but if you are cranking up the black gloss or the matte density and you have the shiny reflection on the floor, it's going to cause some issues. So just know, if you're going to use the shiny floor, you need that black gloss and that matte density to be as close as possible to zero. All right, so let's move on to the second shot. Now, I was causing all kinds of problems this day because the original plan was just to keep this same set and have this guy on the second guy coming in, have him on the same set. Everything was going to be fine. But he had this super cool, like, gray outfit. And I'm like, man, that looks so awesome. And I don't think that's the vibe for this set, but I love his outfit. And so one of the things, if you've heard us talk about this, you'll know that we talk a lot about having the outfit match the set. And so I remembered that I went to Finland a couple of years ago, and while I was there, I went to the airport. In fact, go ahead, and if you can show me in a second, behind the scenes, there's a shot of me kind of setting up this plate. And what I was doing is I get off the airplane, and I walk out of the airport. I've traveled to Finland quite a bit for different reasons. And so I already kind of knew the vibe of the airport, and I just waited for a little bit. It was, I can't remember, early in the morning, I think. And when I was there, and so everybody left and the whole place was just empty. And so this is me. I'm super exhausted. Like, it's been a long flight over, but I'm like, I've got my suitcase sitting on the floor. I've whipped it out. I don't know, like, will I get in trouble for this? I have no idea. So whipped out my little Peak Design tripod. I'm showing like how high it was, because I didn't bring a tape measure or anything. It was just kind of like wait, this would make a really cool looking plate. And so shot that really quick. And it's not very long, but I shot a side angle, and I think we could kind of just show I don't know if we have the multi-view, or sure, yeah. So you can kind of see there he is in it. And then if we have the multi-view shot of just the angles, I'd also like to show false color with this when we get a second to do that. So But yeah, so here you can see, like, he looked good. He looked really good in this shot. I don't know if Isaac, if it's easy to pop over to the tight in the side, but there, yeah, you can see there's the tight that we had, and then there's a side shot that we also have somewhere in here as well.
Look how the lights of the window was reflecting in his glasses. It looks just like the airport window.
Oh, I'm glad you said that. So we actually changed his glasses because his first set of glasses had an anti-glare, anti-reflective coating on it, which is awesome. What's interesting though is it will take the color that's coming into it, the white color, and it makes it kind of this like dark bluish, purplish kind of color a little bit. It was kind of funny because at first when it was small on a multi-view, Tyler's like, oh, what? How is it reflecting blue in his glasses? Like, what in the world? Because it's kind of this blue sky out behind it. But then it was like, well, that's not really what it's doing. And it's very noisy. It's very, for those that know keying, they would look at it and know immediately that's what it was. So luckily he had a different set of glasses that we were able to use, which is funny because they were super reflective, super not anti-glare. But yeah, you're right. So if we go over to that multi-view, you can see, so you can see it in the shot, but I think it sells it really well and makes it look really good. So what's interesting about this that I wanted to bring up using Nobe Omniscope again, in fact, maybe we could take those scopes now full screen, is you can see here, now we have a very different exposure set. So you'll notice, like, I still do have these darks in the blacks of the chairs that are there, but that's really kind of it. And you'll notice, like, on him, I'm not really going into like that dark purpley color. And that's because just the nature of what he's wearing doesn't warrant that, and it would actually look kind of weird if it was that dark. Like if we had this in dark shadow over here, he's a light gray color outfit. And so, I wanted to show this but again, I'm still looking at what's my exposure level of this yellow and what's the intensity, the saturation of this yellow, so that in all of these shots, I'm getting the exposure the same. And then the same on his face, right? So I'm looking through his face and I'm trying to figure out, okay, how much can I push this in this light area here? And how much can I let it go dark? But again, the nature of this shot doesn't lend itself to be as dark, at least from my perspective. And so now if we go back to the shot that we could do the other multi-view there, you can see the final shots and they're pretty close in exposure. I mean, there are things that I would tweak on this one to be clear. Like we threw this one in last minute. There's some adjustments I would make. I think there's a focal plane issue on the wide shot where I think the focus is kind of here planarly in the plane, and he's up here in the plane. I don't really know how to draw that exactly, but I like that we have these
forward than
right.
It should be.
Yeah, so really the focus point is here and his feet are up here. So that was like a little miss that had we had a little more time, I probably just would have softened up this area just a little bit more to make this feel a little more in focus right where his feet are. But outside of that, we I think we got that pretty close to where it needs to be. So this was a really fun shot, and I thought the end result really worked well with his vibe, and it was standing, which was a little different than the other ones because we had them mainly be seated. But I think the end result. Any other thoughts on this?
Yeah,
one
I have two. I have two things I want to say about it. Number one, sorry to cut you off, Jay.
No, I'm wondering if we're gonna say the same thing.
Number one was that I realized, timing wise, this dude had an hour he wanted to film.
Okay.
And I think what we should have done in retrospect is all stopped and gone, okay, well, wait a minute. Let's get the other guy who's our third set in next, because he has a bunch of content we need to film and we don't have this setup ready at all. Right. And so we could have spent more time dialing in this this gray guy's setup if we had then pushed him to be end of day Friday. Because this was 2 days kind of in a row. So this was Thursday that we ended up doing this. And it's like, well, wait, he has the least amount of content. I kind of feel like we should have pushed him to the next day because he was local too. So it would have been easy for us to say, hey, you know what? Let's have you come back tomorrow. And then we'll take this other guy. We'll have him film today. And we'll take some time to get his stuff set up and get him going. And then we could have kind of switched the next day.
Interesting.
And had more time to kind of dial it in, because what ended up happening was we rushed to get this ready, rushed through his filming and rushed to switch to the next set so that guy could be ready to go all day Friday. And I feel like if we had kind of flipped that around a little bit, we could have spent more time on both sets and still gotten roughly the same amount of content done. Maybe I'm totally wrong about that. I have no idea, right?
Yeah.
The only
My hypothesis would be that instead what would happen is it would have taken the rest of the day to get the third set up.
Yep.
My hypothesis is we would have, there's this theory of like things expand or contract into the constraint that they've been given, so it's like, well, we have 1 hour to do it. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I think
I'm talking only in terms of amount of content.
Sure.
Well, I will say, though, that the other guy did travel from Florida, so he was going to be here on Friday, whether he recorded or not.
Mhm.
So it was better for him to be able to stay late with us,
Yep.
hang out, get him set up, and then record on Friday. My point was going to be that if you go back to that, if we can go back to the full screen, there's two things about this set. One is this is the exact same piece of reflective flooring. I said we'd make a callback to that. So basically what we did was we took the cutout piece.
We maybe have behind the scenes on this that
We may.
could show.
We had a cutout piece
That was under the chairs.
Yep, and we just turned it around because luckily if you look at the floor, there are lines going across from the tile. So that line, that hard line that we were feeling a bit frustrated with on the last shot, that we were talking about, that sort of blended in with the floor here. So you can't really see it.
We'll show. I think we could show.
Yeah, the floor was
EPS
very,
on
very
this. So
shiny.
just hit play right there. There you go.
see,
Yeah.
So
there it is. There's the hard edge, but when you go back to the other shot, it kind of blends in with the tiles
the
on the floor.
horizontal line
Yeah.
of the tile.
So that's nice when you're dealing with that. The second one is the original plate for this is actually flipped. So I believe if
Right.
you go back and look at the behind the scenes footage, you will have noticed that the windows were actually on the right side when he was shooting it. But what we like to do is flip these sets because that way it was a lot easier for us to go from the other set where the light was motivated from the left to the right. And we didn't have to swing our big gigalight, as we call it, around to the other side and go with an entirely new setup. It was a lot faster for us to go from one set to the next.
and all that moving and changing affects the background lighting. The
right.
on the green
False
background.
color.
False color. Yeah.
And speaking of flipping the set, number one, sorry, I didn't realize behind the scenes of green, I was like, I didn't record B-roll of this. And yeah, I see what you mean now. If you go to the AirPlay here, we were looking at this side shot originally. This is the original side shot, and it's kind of small in here, but it's so blue. And we were feeling like, man, he is gray. And Andre, you were like, well, let's desaturate the whole thing. And I'm like, well, hold on. I think I have an idea here. So I went in and I qualified all of our blue tones of all saturation levels, almost all saturation levels, and all luminance levels, but all the blue tones, and just desaturated those. And that made it where we had still those saturated-ish kind of wood tones in the background, but it just took the blue and really,
It's much better.
really toned that down.
Amazing.
Yep.
And so that worked out really, really well in the end, I think. And then I think you still desaturated it more in the Ultimatte. You can kind of see that final result still more desaturated, but you had a kind of better starting point to work with.
I'm glad you said this, and because I forgot to say in that first shot, the first setup we did, I actually desaturated both the foreground and the background about 30% using the Ultimatte. So normally we don't do that. And what's funny is when you look at it, it's like, man, the colors are really rich, but in actuality, it's like a 30% desaturation. So it's just all around getting all the black levels and white levels really aligned that gives it that sense of real richness to it. And in fact, it was just like a little too much when it was all full. And then on this one, I don't remember, but I definitely desaturated a little bit more. I was like, you know what? I was feeling
well, you can cut to Apple TV to see the original. Here's the original plate, so to speak.
Yeah.
This did have a lot of generative fill we ended up doing on it.
Because we had a lot of airport. That's fine. We don't have to do all that. But we had a lot of airport signs and stuff that were in here.
Well, I was just going to show. I have this. Look,
Okay.
I can show you. Here's exactly everywhere we generative filled.
Yeah, that's great.
So you can see kind of the before and the after if it looks.
Yeah.
But Look,
There it goes.
There it goes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I think also there were a lot of people moving in the background, and we used generative fill to take away that movement because it was distracting. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right there.
and we settled them down a little bit, so we kind of got a little clip where they really still are there and they're moving around, but they're just sitting in chairs and kind of. So we just kind of looked at that,
And
and
looped it.
they just so there is a little movement in
a
it.
little subtle movement.
Yeah.
One thing I think works more than I ever expected it to is the amount at which looping works in plates for us. This plate and the first plate were both looped where it would go and then it would go to reverse. And that's just kind of how it looped the plate. Normally we try to make it where it cross dissolves into itself from the end to the beginning. But something that's working more frequently than I think I would have expected is just that it goes and then now it goes in reverse and then just kind of ping pongs back and forth to make a loop.
What allows that to happen is a lengthy plate, right? So
I mean, this one was like a minute.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
So it's like
sometimes
it's only because they don't get up. People don't leave.
Okay, so in this case, they're far away enough,
Right.
that we're not noticing me doing this.
Yeah. Right.
The whole
Yeah,
time.
exactly.
Because in another plate that we shot that we'll be using in the future in the mayor's office, there's like a light on the ground, and it's like an hour-long plate, and we were able to loop that back and forth because over time it's so long you don't notice it. You're paying attention.
And that's the same thing that happened with green. The first plate we talked first set, it has this huge shift of light coming in through the window, but because it's long enough, it can go back and it not look like it's ping ponging back and forth.
Right.
But yeah, if you have even lighting like you do in this airport, and you don't have really a lot of movement in the frame, you can get away with a much shorter plate because you can just go.
So after we were done with that plate,
Wait,
we
can I just say, can you just point out those shoes? Look at his feet. Look at the feet on the floor.
Oh, yep.
I mean, not that. No, the real
composite.
I mean, look at that. He's standing there.
So good, man.
His feet are on that airport floor.
I
had to point that out.
I gotta give a shout out to, I think it's Stipeland. This has been years ago when I'm really researching chroma keying and whatever, and they're like, everyone was doing a Unreal Engine in camera compositing the reflection, and they were like, look at how we're making the feed and whatever, and I'm like, yeah, it still looks a little derpy and it's a little out of sync with the person, whatever. And then I think it was Stipeland was showing their stuff, and they're like, Anarch, here, look at this reflective floor, like look at the floor, look, you can even see the bottom of the shoe. And I'm like, what the crap is happening? Like, how could they possibly be doing that? What? And so then they revealed, like, we just put something shiny down on the floor, and it was like,
thought of that.
Duh, of course. So that really stuck with me. So thanks, guys, for doing that years ago. That was super helpful for me. All right, so we went from that. So that was set number 2. Okay, so this is midday, and now we're towards end of day, and we're going to totally change it up again with set number 3. And so let's go ahead and bring that one up, and we can show that with the false color there too. So here you can see totally different vibe. It was just, man, I was sending this to some friends, like, look at the power of Ultimatte. In one day, look how much we've dramatically changed into these 3 different worlds that we've created. And again, just so you can kind of see that false color, if we could bring that up full screen, here you can see, like, look, I am really embracing shadows. So unlike the last one where there's very little purple, right, which is down in this bottom quadrant over here, instead, we're doing a whole lot more of getting in and really embracing the shadows.
It's like the opposite of the airport.
Uh-huh.
The exact opposite.
Yeah. And you'll see one of the things I'm doing here, right, is I'm trying to get his head. I'm trying to get these kind of 4 colors, this pink and light gray that's kind of over here on this side, and then this green right here and dark gray that you're seeing over here. These are the 4 colors that we're trying to stay within. So essentially we're keeping our exposure inside this range right here. So that's our face exposure. So this is where we're keeping it. And what's cool about this and doing it this way is this is so repeatable, because whoever's setting up the lighting can look at this false color and see. So we have kind of these 2 parts of false color for the green, where we're actually lighting the green wall and making sure we have that evenly lit. And then once we get it in here, we're doing false color to make sure that we can really see these different shots and make sure that we're really getting the the black levels the way we want them. So this dark area here makes sense with the dark area of his shirt. All right. So one thing you may notice is this table. There's kind of a lot of stuff up here. That's because that table sure was being reflective. We've continued to have this issue with this table, but we've just been so slammed. We just don't have time to do it. But my guess is we just need to scuff it up or something like that to get it.
It needs a matte coat on it.
Uh-huh.
I've got to find the right matte clear finish to put on it.
Yeah. I also should mention we did generative fill this. There was something
I was going to
different
show, if you go to Apple TV, I can show that off here in a second.
back here. So we kind of almost looks a little snowy outside, but yeah, instead of some truck out there, we just generative filled that. And what's nice about that is it still left that same, it feels very much like this picture is the reflection that's happening down here, which I think is really nice on this as well. One thing I will say about this, a friend of mine, I was showing it to, he's like, the only thing I wish I could see is the light that's motivating this, that's coming in. And so I just said, well, because, you have this hot spot here. Probably if I had a little more time, I would have put in some kind of flag right here just to knock that down a stop or two, just to kind of get that a little darker. But essentially, I guess kind of the way I'm looking at it is these shelves are lighting him up a little bit. That's the only part of it that feels a little false, There actually is, I know, because this is an actual place, and if you go that way, there is a window that would be coming in and hitting him. But
well, if you go to last week's debrief, you see the other version of this plate. Like if you're watching this and you watch last week's, you're like, wait a minute, I've seen this set before, but you actually kind of haven't. You're like, it's different. We shot two versions of this plate. This is the standing version. The other one was the sitting. Yep. And the sitting version was actually built for two people, where the standing was built for one. And that's why the framing here is so different. You'll see, especially in this side shot here, this side shot is completely different from the side shot. And I think some of the wide from that 2-up, it kind of gives the impression of like, you can tell, oh, here's where the light's coming from to a certain extent. It was really interesting messing with this, though. Like, what worked out really well was he really wanted to be up on a stool, a tall stool. I hate tall stools as a personal preference, but he really wanted to be on a tall stool. And that worked out because we had just filmed someone standing. So luckily we had a standing version of this plate. And so we started pushing that in. One funny thing that did end up happening, though, with plates is there was just this cross dissolve that was about 3 frames too long. And there was 3 frames of a person moving through it. And there are times where I don't realize the words I'm saying because I'm just so processing whatever the problem is. And so I'm standing next to Tyler as we're lighting this, and I'm watching and I'm squinting at the TV, and I see kind of this happen. I'm like, there's a ghost in here. And then I just walk out of the room. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, if our client heard that, he's like very concerned.
It's a little crazy.
And he just disappears.
Like, what? Yeah.
One other big piece to that. Can you go to the wide shot? And then I'll ask you to cut the 2 other shots. So one thing you can deal with that can be difficult at times is when you have a shiny head. Take Tyler and Andre for example, if you'd like to cut to station 6 or station 5.
Do you mean? Look at this. We both have a little. This light right here is not up here. It's way back there. It's
but
way behind me.
What we were trying to do on this set was we did want to bring some warmth to his shoulder, and also I actually kind of combined like the warmth from the lights that are behind his shoulder and the window, the light, the cooler light coming from the window. So I kind of was eyeballing it and just sort of like feeling that with the color temperature of the light that we put on him. But what can be difficult is when you're using barn doors, barn doors aren't like super. You can't get a real straight edge, or you can't really aim them the way you want to.
General directional.
Yeah,
aiming,
exactly. And like you can flag off the floor and stuff, but this time to avoid that reflection on his head, we really needed a very accurate like cropping and flagging of the light. So if you go to the B-roll, Isaac, this is the first time we've hung these up in the studio. This time we decided to break out the Lecos that we've gotten recently. So we've been doing some things with lighting and kind of making some trades and things. And so we finally acquired some Lecos. So the Leco really allowed us to get that light on his shoulder, which also can help solve the marker outline problem, which we've talked about in the past. But this time we were able to put the light to not only hit his shoulder, but also spill onto the to the table to sort of kill some of the green that was reflecting off of the table. And I was able to basically draw a line directly at the bottom of his neck where his shirt was. And so we could get all of that light like spilling over his shoulder, but none of it was reflecting on the top of his head or hitting his neck with like a really strong line. So that was really, really satisfying.
Yeah.
To be able to light it the right way and not get the stupid reflection that we've dealt with forever, because the barn doors,
Right.
sometimes they just suck,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, they just can't edge the light in the same way a Leco could. So we've got 2 Lecos
Huge
now
Leco.
that we're deploying, and that's connected to this 575 hive.
They're
light.
struggling with the pin connection.
Right. Inside there. And that really did great. I will say, I have bad news a little bit for you, Jay. As the day went on, our talent did kind of move around a little, and there was some times where that light hit, but it still makes sense when it hits, because it's like, yeah, I know
The light exists there, and
there's
can't.
still a light that's behind him that
Right.
feels motivated to it. And so if we just go back to those stills, instead of just the multi-view, yeah. So you can see it. I mean, there is some of the light that'll hit over there depending on how he turns his head. But our brain understands a globe, and it understands that that's coming from
globe.
this. You know what I mean? And so it understands how that's happening. And you'll notice though, this nice, man, it's just such a pretty soft light that hits right there that felt really good.
I think something else that was interesting about this whole thing was just, sorry, Tyler, did I cut you off? No, okay. I think something else interesting that happened with all this was we had a lot of discussion about camera angles on this one, because we had kind of a good wealth of things to start with. We kind of tried to make the wide shot the main shot, but Tyler, you don't you like the wide shot as the establishing shot. And what we eventually did was we made that wide shot off axis, so that the side shot, so that the kind of main shot, the main one he was looking at, was using our medium background, because we had a physical medium zoomed in background. And what's crazy to me is that somehow in all of this, it totally makes sense. But in real life, the wide and the medium are directly on top of each other. And so,
right. But this, instead of looking like this, looks like it's kind of off to the side shooting on him.
Right.
This looks very much straight on. But yeah, it worked perfectly. It was like, oh, this feels very.
Man, I was on that wide. That wide shot is so gorgeous. I was on that a lot just because it just looks so pretty. And we don't typically, the wide shot is the one that I'm like, well, I'll show it every now and then, but then I'll get on this tight shot most of the time. But it just looked so nice. And then anytime he was talking about certain things, like I don't know, referencing something, somebody else, I would go to that, and it just looked so pretty to look at.
It was so funny because, Tyler, I remember you saying, yeah, well, I mean, I never really go to the wide shot, as we were discussing like what shots we should have. And then I remember sitting down, like we're filming that day, and you kept going, I love this wide shot.
Well, and the prompter would be so far away too, and he had some really dense notes on his presentation that he was using. Can we go back to that shot of the table there for a second? The wide, you can see there's a piece of paper. If you look between on the, let's see, the left-hand side of the shot, the other way, between where the iPad stand is and the there's a white piece of paper.
This thing right here.
Yeah. So in earlier shots, that was reflecting, or actually it was transparent, and it right there, it kind of looked like the reflection of the bookshelf in the background. But it seemed like as time went on, that looked less and less like a reflection to me, as it looked like transparency. So I just took one of the sheets of his notes and kind of laid it on the table there between those two, just to get rid of that bit too.
And he was a professor, so this worked.
He had books and papers everywhere, so it's like, yeah, it works for him. I'm just so thankful that he had a bunch of stuff that kind of made a lot.
We piled that table full of stuff.
Made a lot of sense to have it there. But other people, I don't know that it would have. We'll have to figure out a solution, but.
Yeah, we got to work on that table.
But filling that little gap in actually was kind of it was like, okay, let's just put something there, because I didn't want anybody to be distracted by it. So.
This guy was a machine.
A machine.
He just cranked, and we just got, I don't know, 5 hours of content.
Yeah, it was over 5 hours.
Essentially what we did is, to just recap, we had that first set that we talked about. We changed over the second set, and then we spent the rest of the day dialing in this set so that he could come in the next morning and record. So I hear Isaac's concerns about that, but I actually feel like from a process flow, it worked the best doing it this way. He was able to leave right around 5 and get everything done. So it worked really good.
We started at what, 9 or so. He just started cranking. Isaac, how many hours of content?
It was
did you do?
5.
It was
yeah.
5 hours.
5
yeah.
hours of content, and you could count on one hand the number of pickups we had over those.
We lost you, Tyler. There you are.
You could count on one hand the number of pickups we had over the 4 days, I think, that these people were in the studio.
Yeah, they were very talented. And speaking of pickups, Isaac, you played a different role. So unfortunately, Hurricane Helen, is that what it is? Helene.
A tree fell on my parents' house,
Yeah.
and I had to get out of here. So I and this is one point I wanted to make because I probably won't talk a whole lot after this, but I wanted to say thanks to Isaac for stepping in my role, and also thanks to Andre, because you go to Andre when you have something happen with your family or something, and you're like, "Hey, a tree fell," and like before you can even finish, he's like, "Cool, why you still here? See ya, bye." So I appreciate big time letting me step out for the day. Luckily, we have an awesome team, and anybody can step in any role. So that's one thing I wanted to mention is I was driving south to go help my parents out, which I got to be a redneck and use a chainsaw, and it was really fun.
You did come back with camouflage.
I did come back with camouflage. I was in South Georgia.
Cool new hat.
But I will say Andre is a very family first oriented person, and I do appreciate the ease of being able to jump out of here and know that I'm everything got done, and here we are looking at it, and it looked really good. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I will just say just a management note about that. I've never, ever, never, ever, never regretted putting family first, myself or for any of the team. So the show will go on in 100 years from now. No one's going to remember that detail, right? So it's just like, I mean, there are times when it's like, I've done some terrible things. Like one time Tyler stayed until like 3 a.m. one morning. Anyway, it's a long story, but I have a couple of times where it's like, I cannot at all because everything breaks if this thing isn't finished. But those are hopefully massively rare exceptions to the rule. And I'm trying my absolute best in all circumstances to say, if your family needs you, you should be with your family.
Hey, I'll say I've been here till 2 a.m. in the morning when we had to be back at 6. Back when we used to build physical sets.
Yeah.
And one thing I'll say is I love this job so much that people are like, that sucks. You had to stay there late, and I'm like, yeah, but like even though it was sort of stressful, I basically had fun the whole time. I was doing what I wanted to do. So,
Well, there have been times when there have been a couple of people that have been out for family things, and it's like, man, we are really short staffed. But because we all have benefited from that, and we know how important it is to be able to just put family first like that, we all just kind of rally around and we just get the thing done. Just even though, man, we're stretching our people really thin.
My hope is when I ask us to stay late and work long, which hopefully is, I'm continuing to try to make that rare and not common, that it's a exception to the rule that feels acceptable because we've also compensated in the other direction too. So
yeah, I'm always, every time I'm staying late, I'm like, well, next Wednesday, I'm going to go play golf.
yeah. And I do try to, the other management tip I'll give you is I try to rectify that late staying as quickly as possible. So, it's like, hey, the next day you don't have to be in, or 2 days from now, we'll take the day off or whatever it is to try to get that back in balance. Well, but Isaac was able to sit at Jay's station and do Jay's role that day, and you started playing around with BitFocus Companion.
Yeah,
and you made some new buttons.
Shocking to the people that are
shocking. I know.
What'd you do, and what did they do?
Buttons. Well, I want to actually make one thing real quick. I did end up focused on this, and one thing that happened because of it is I didn't end up live editing this guy's stuff, like editing as he was going. Which is maybe not the best call, but the dude was a machine. I literally think we picked up for him twice the whole time. It was great. But yeah, so I made some buttons because I realized a variable, and I guess we have this variable for when we record. That's kind of our video name. So you can see, look, this is Debrief. You can see we're recording. You can see it says actual take. Don't worry about that. And I realized you can feed a variable other variables. So I made 2 new variables. I made video counter and take counter. And then I made a button that adds 1 to video counter, adds 1 to take counter, subtracts, and one that resets it to 0. So now all you have to do is put in talent name and then copy and paste in video counter video counter, take counter. And I may make this, instead of being in the variable, be in the hyperdeck name, but that just takes longer because I have to paste it across all these buttons up here. But yeah, it literally just, when you hit +1, it adds 1 to video or 1 to take, and then you can reset them. It's super simple, and it made it where when it was time to make a new video, I just hit 2 buttons and went and go. One thing I did notice is if I did increase take number for some reason or another, it was easy to forget that. So something that I felt was, there's not really I think what I may make it do is, if you ever increase video number, it automatically resets the take number, because of course it should. That makes sense. And then the other thing I'd want it to do ideally is just every time you hit record, like, it would be cool if it could understand, I hit video +1. If I hit record now, it is just going to record it. But if I stop and hit record again, it just automatically adds a take, right? Or automatically does that. But I'm realizing the problem with that has been that automation can't understand the difference between recording a new video and recording a new take. And so it's easier just to have manual buttons you push, because again, it's so fast to just hit 2 buttons and go if you need to. So yeah, but those are the buttons I made. It did require some shuffling, and yeah, I think it's going to be really beneficial. And then the other thing, you can't see it right now, this stop button, which stops our recordings when it's not stopping the recordings, it just kind of sits idle. I have it show, you can see, it's going to say the name of the video you're about to record up there. So that way you can tell before you hit record, what's the name of the file I'm about to record. And so something I realized kind of sitting in this role is that I think it's difficult for us to do this because we try to be so open and accommodating to everybody. But I think it's important to communicate when we need to take our time to a client, and especially when it comes to like file naming, recording something. And I think what we've kind of decided, some of that is, let's just name it nothing. It's just video 1, video 2, 3, 4, 5. And then what I was doing is actually, wait, I realized I can just open this. Apple Music apparently is what I was going to open. I can go to our Notion here. So when I was taking notes for him, I would then be kind of adding disclaimers of what in the world was going on. So you could see as I added them in here, I just kind of, it's the Notions kind of just has the file name of whatever was recorded. And you can see this is before I made the take buttons. But then I just add, if there's anything, hey, this doesn't need to be transferred. That's a scratch take. Hey, this should be take 1, but I didn't have my system right yet. Hey, this is an outro pickup because there's a sound of a truck. Hey, these ones are thumbnails. Hey, this one is file misnamed because this thing happened. Oh, hey, takes weren't reset. This was take 1. This was take 1. Again, I'll actually take 1. So something I've realized is adding into that title up there is the better way for us to communicate something, because then it lets you go faster. Yep. It shortens the amount of time between because this guy, I mean, I could have just given him the recording buttons and just been like, here's the button you hit to record, here's the button you hit to stop. And he would have just done it all day. No problem. And so it's like, especially for someone like that, having the ability to just hit go and then figure that out later and then kind of note that down somewhere, I think that's important. One thing I felt being in that position is that I worked with too good of talent that day for me to understand everything, Jay, that you have to deal with, because I didn't have to do a million pickups.
Right.
But
to the good days.
Yeah, exactly. It was such a good day that
God was smiling on us with our
that guy has his own YouTube channel with 900 videos. So.
He's done a few.
Well, and I think one other thing I want to say about him, though, that was interesting. He said, literally to me at the end of the day, I was talking to him, he said, I think that was the best day of my life. I'm like,
awesome.
Wow, thank you.
It's awesome. Amazing. That's so cool.
I think as you're watching this and you're learning about this in real time, so am I. And what has really become important to me, and also and Isaac has said this, is like I don't like to linger between takes, and so having to ask for a name or type in a name or copy and paste a name, all those things do is just slow us down from getting to the next video.
Yeah.
So we have developed a strong opinion, like video 1 take 1, video 2 take 1, et cetera, et cetera. And this is really nice learning about this, knowing that, man, I'm just going to be able to click these. I'll probably double check it as we go.
Right. Well, and as Morgan was kind of listening through, because this wasn't Unreal, so he kind of had some time to hear what I was saying. And I said, listen, I've had this thought in the back of my mind about how all this should work. And so, Morgan, you started asking ChatGPT about that.
We kind of mocked up an interface here, and I'll kind of show that here, of what this could look like in the future of a web interface.
Wait. Hold on.
Yeah.
Before
You didn't hype it up enough.
Hold on. Morgan, this is built in React. What would you say your skill level is in using React JavaScript?
Very little.
Okay.
Very low.
So how in the because it's too good. Like, wait a minute. So you went to ChatGPT and you told it some things. Like, walk us through just a little bit about this, because I also have a software company.
That's right. You
And this
point
is like blowing my mind. So like spend just a second on this, actually explaining what you did here.
Yeah. So
before you tell what the actual tool is going to do.
Sure. So one of the things is like with Bitfocus Companion, it's kind of built on Node and things like that. And so I've been working to kind of learn a little bit of development side. I've got a little bit of developer knowledge. I went to school for a couple different classes on it, but very little in React and all that. And so for me, I found with ChatGPT, I can kind of describe the problem, and I can kind of describe what I'm trying to create with it, what the interface should look like, what I want it to do. And using that and a little bit of developer knowledge, I can kind of tie it all together and create interfaces and rapid prototype things.
Okay, now you can show it.
So, so with this, we ended up just taking Isaac's idea, concept, and kind of describing it to ChatGPT. So you got your video title up here that you can kind of do, your video intake numbers, which you can increase or decrease, or you can type in numbers if you wanted. All of this is purely front-end development. Is that what they call it on?
Yes, yeah.
So this
is
isn't
actually tied into
anything. Yeah, it's not tied into anything. I just had it create fake data. But as you can see here, this would tie into our hyperdeck. And one thing we're having to do right now is we're having to go to the ATEM software control to set the source for each of the hyperdecks. So that's an extra step, Jay, that you have to do. If this was all in the web interface, you could just easily drop down and pick, what you want.
My hope too with this would be that
isn't this cool?
Yeah.
My hope too would then also be that all of that would tie into the individual audio things, so you can check individual audio.
So what we're doing here, and of course you're just prototyping it right now, but dude, this is like a whole this is so cool.
Well, and I love that feature that he just showed. I think is amazing to us, of this kind of arming to record idea. So this idea that a lot of times we're not recording, we need 7 hyperdecks and our buttons kind of go 2, 4, 6, 8. And so it's like, well, having the ability to say, I need 3 or I need 4, I just need to record whatever I need to record.
And you can pick any order of it.
Right. And then ideally too, I could pick, hey, I want this one in ProRes, just change all of it from here.
Right. That way we're not just recording black to hyperdeck 8.
So,
So
this, Morgan, I just want you to know, like, I was so freaked out impressed when I saw this, because it's just like, and it's like responsive to, like, it's, it'll allow dynamic changing. It's like, man, the whole world, you guys, if you're not on AI and doing stuff with AI, just I can't get into it here, but I'll just say you should be, and pay attention to it. The amount of freedom and flexibility that it's providing. I mean, this is very close to being a real thing. Like most of the interface is done, and
now it's just all the backend work.
Yeah.
Right. And the backend work too, it's like, well, Companion already exists.
Right.
So if we can trigger Companion to do this stuff, we don't even have to really deep dive into that backend.
So funny.
To learn about it.
And the beauty of it is Blackmagic has released a bunch of RESTful API calls that you can make. So it's going to be super easy to kind of tie it all in to get that data in real time. And
so
you mentioned, Isaac, having it feed into Bitfocus. I think this could almost
be standalone.
And standalone.
I just like the idea still of physical buttons. So maybe it becomes a standalone thing that is triggered via Bitfocus instead than a companion. Then, who knows what the future holds?
Yeah,
exactly.
But the point is, this thing is going to be pretty revolutionary for us. And again, not because it's like, it's doing things we never could do before, but instead it's taking all this interface and bringing it into one tool, which I always love. And it's making it just very simple and clear exactly what's happening. I'm super pumped about both of these innovations when it comes to the Stream Deck functionality and then this front end interface. Again, we still got to tie it in the back end. We'll keep you posted as we make the progress on this. But the fact that you could get this far with some basic programming knowledge in ChatGPT blows my mind. Well, we've covered a lot, right? We've covered everything from 3 different sets, how we're using the Nobe Omniscope. So make sure and check that out. That's been a big change to our workflow that I really feel like has upped our game. So really want to make sure I've shared that with you guys. I just love how each of these sets came out. I think they turned out really pretty great. So thanks for taking the time to watch with us today. And listen, if you're a studio and you're like, man, we need some help with some of this stuff. We see some of the things SociallyU's doing. Again, we try to just put this pitch at the very end, so you could go on about your life if this is something you're not interested in. But if you're needing some consulting, we are ready to help you with that. And so just go to SociallyU.com and you can click on the consulting tab there, studio consulting button, and then just press that, fill that out. We'll get in touch with you, and we'd love to hear more about your project and see just kind of what it is you're up to and see if there's a way we can help you. So as always, man, thanks for watching all of these. We have so much more to show you. This is just the beginning.